Hello neighbor, you are now watching Prophetic News in Focus. In current times, the world is witnessing first-hand dramatic accounts of Bible prophecy being fulfilled at an alarming rate, bringing the return of Jesus Christ nearer every day. This week, Prophetic News in Focus presents a prophecy update. In today's broadcast, we will explore the scriptural passages that reveal these truths to a searching generation. Welcome to another broadcast of Prophetic News in Focus. In this week's headlines,
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says he will press forward with a military operation in the Gaza Strip. Israel and Palestinian militants exchanged fire after the latest round of peace talks failed. Attorney General Eric Holder is in Missouri to meet with officials carrying out an investigation into the fatal police shooting of Michael Brown. Police officer Darren Wilson shot the unarmed black 18-year-old during a confrontation. President Barack Obama said the U.S. will continue to confront Islamic State extremists despite the brutal murder of American journalist James Foley, who was captured in Syria 2 years ago. Obama accused the Islamic State of torturing, raping, and murdering thousands of people.
Israel Army accused of targeting Hamas military chief. Rocket sirens blare throughout the country as the truce breaks down. U.S. State Department calls for a ceasefire amid renewed violence. And Hamas fighters give a glimpse into their border tunnel network.
The recent so-called ceasefire was broken Tuesday as 3 rockets fired from Gaza hit Beersheba and Netivot. In response to the rocket fire, the IDF began striking terror targets in the Gaza Strip, including a home in which, according to intelligence, Hamas leader Mohammed Def was staying. The escalation brought missiles to the Tel Aviv, Gush Dan area, Jerusalem, and the south of Israel has been undergoing continuous missile and rocket fire for almost 24 hours straight. More than 160 rockets were fired towards Israeli communities. Senior Hamas leader Mohammed Def may have been killed in airstrikes, this is according to Fox News, despite Israel's silence and Hamas' denial of Def's death. According to the report, Israeli intelligence officials told Fox News that Def, who is the head of Hamas's military wing, the Al-Qassam Brigades, was killed during the Israeli Air Force airstrike during the same attack that killed the terror leader's wife and son. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Defense Minister Moshe Yaalon spoke to the press Wednesday, providing direction and developments on the renewed fighting with Hamas.
Hamas is like ISIS. ISIS is like Hamas. They're branches of the same tree. And I can say that the entire world has been shocked by the atrocities of ISIS. You saw this, the beheading of an American journalist, Foley. It shows you the barbarism, the savagery of these people. Well, we face the same savagery. The people who wantonly rocket our cities and want to conduct mass killings. And when they can, they murder children, teenagers, shoot them in the head, throw people from the 6th floor, their own people, and use their people as human shields. Hamas is ISIS, ISIS is Hamas. They're the enemies of peace, they're the enemies of Israel, they're the enemies of all civilized countries. And I believe they're the enemies of the Palestinians themselves. And I'm not the only one who believes that.
the drama of the ages that is currently taking place before our very eyes is moving us towards a tremendous climax, and the script for what is happening and will happen on the world stage is contained within the pages of God's Word, the Bible.
And I saw thrones, and they sat upon them, and judgment was given unto them. And I saw the souls of them that were beheaded for the witness of Jesus and for the word of God, and which had not worshipped the beast, neither his image, neither had received his mark upon their foreheads or in their hands. And they lived and reigned with Christ 1,000 years.
I call on my friends, family, and loved ones to rise up against my real killers. I wish I had more time. I wish I could have the hope of freedom and seeing my family once again. But that ship has sailed.
This is James Wright Foley, an American citizen of your country. As a government, you have been at the forefront of the aggression towards the Islamic State. You have plotted against us and gone far out of your way to find reasons to interfere in our affairs. Today, your military air force is attacking us daily in Iraq. Your strikes have caused casualties amongst Muslims. You are no longer fighting an insurgency. We are an Islamic army and a state that has been accepted by a large number of Muslims worldwide. So effectively, any aggression towards the Islamic State is an aggression towards Muslims from all walks of life who have accepted the Islamic Caliphate as their leadership. So any attempt by you, Obama, to deny the Muslims their rights of living in safety under the Islamic Caliphate will result in the bloodshed of your people. The life of this American citizen, Obama, depends on your next decision. This is James Wright Foley.
With journalist James Foley's death confirmed, U.S. President Obama had a message for the Islamic State militants who killed him.
When people harm Americans anywhere, we do what's necessary to see that justice is done. We act against ISIL, standing alongside others. The people of Iraq, who with our support are taking the fight to ISIL, must continue coming together to expel these terrorists from their communities.
Obama's statement came less than 24 hours after the release of a video by Islamic State militants showing Foley beheaded in Iraq.
I call on my friends, family, and loved ones to rise up against my real killers, the U.S. government.
The video warns of greater retaliation to come against Americans, following nearly 2 weeks of U.S. airstrikes that have pounded Islamic State positions in Iraq. But Obama says the fight will go on.
Governments and peoples across the Middle East, there has to be a common effort to extract this cancer so that it does not spread.
We didn't watch that.
And for the Foley family, news of James' death is still sinking in.
It's horrific. I mean, people can die in lots of different ways, but this way was the most horrific.
Another journalist, Stephen Sotloff, is also believed to be a hostage of the militants, who say his survival now depends on what the U.S. does next in Iraq.
I call on my friends, family, and loved ones to rise up against my real killers, the U.S. government. For what will happen to me is only a result of their complacency and criminality. My message to my beloved parents: save me some dignity and don't accept any meager compensation for my death from the same people who effectively hit the last nail in my coffin with their recent aerial campaign in Iraq. I call on my brother John, who is a member of the U.S. Air Force. Think about what you are doing. Think about the lives you destroy, including those of your own family. I call on you, John. Think about who made the decision to bomb Iraq recently and kill those people, whoever they may have been. Think, John, who did they really kill? And did they think about me, you, our family, when they made that decision? I died that day, John. When your colleagues dropped that bomb on those people, they signed my death certificate. I wish I had more time. I wish I could have the hope of freedom and seeing my family once again. But that ship has sailed. I guess all in all, I wish I wasn't American.
This is James Wright Foley, an American citizen of your country. As a government, you have been at the forefront of the aggression towards the Islamic State. You have plotted against us and gone far out of your way to find reasons to interfere in our affairs. Today, your military air force is attacking us daily in Iraq. Your strikes have caused casualties amongst Muslims. You are no longer fighting an insurgency. We are an Islamic army and a state that has been accepted by a large number of Muslims worldwide. So effectively, any aggression towards the Islamic State is an aggression towards Muslims from all walks of life who have accepted the Islamic Caliphate as their leadership. So any attempt by you, Obama, to deny the Muslims their rights of living in safety under the Islamic Caliphate will result in the bloodshed of your people. This American citizen, Obama, depends on your next decision.
Just that we're very proud of Jim. You know, he was a courageous, fearless journalist, a very compassionate American. I mean, the best of America. And he always hoped that he would come home. That was his hope, and he sustained all the others who were with him really with that hope.
But before coming home, he wanted to support his fellow inmates. He was always the first guy in line, the one who would take the bullet first, the one who would speak to the guards about inequities in food. He was never a slacker. He was always the standard, the bearer, the stand-up guy, which was his passion. That's what he wanted to do for others. That's what he wanted to do for his fellow journalists. We also appreciate the tremendous number of prayers that we've received and Jimmy received throughout all of our communities. Jimmy had said in Libya, and we're very sure now that he could feel the prayers, and we think his strength came from God.
Well, we know it did. As a matter of fact, we are the only American family that has never received a letter from Jim. They apparently were all confiscated. So the last hostage to come out, please just, Daniel memorized a letter from Jim. And within hours of his freedom, he was good enough to call and voice that letter to us. And it just spoke of his yearning to see all of us once again. Jim was very close to the family, too. And his niece and nephews, he was, so he really expressed his love in that. Honey, please shut it off. So anyway, we're very grateful for that. But as John said, so many people were praying for Jim. And I really think that's what gave Jim an unusual courage. Jim just could feel the prayers. He was strong, courageous, loving to the end. We just hardly recognize our little boy. He was just a hero.
And from the videos, his last words were, "I wish I had more time to see my family."
So Jim had a big heart, and that's what we shared with President Obama. We just pray that Jim's death can bring our country together in a stronger way, and with the values that Jim held dear. Held dear. Sir, Jim would never want us to hate or be bitter, and we cannot do that. And so we are just very proud of Jimmy, and we are praying for the strength to love like he did, and to stay courageous and to keep fighting for all the people that he was fighting for, and again to pray for mercy for the remaining American hostages.
Breaking news tonight. We want to welcome our viewers from around the world to this breaking news coverage. An American journalist has been beheaded by ISIS terrorists. A video showing the horrific killing and its gruesome aftermath was released on the internet a short while ago, along with a message to the United States to end its intervention in Iraq. The victim was freelance journalist James Foley, who was kidnapped in 2012 while covering the war in Syria. In the video, he is seen kneeling next to a man dressed in black. Foley reads a message, presumably scripted in detail by his captors, that his real killer is America. The video, which is obviously too gruesome for us to show you, then shows Foley's beheading. After that, it shows another American journalist also dressed in orange and kneeling, and that man is believed to be Steve Sotloff, a contributor to Time magazine who was kidnapped at the Syrian-Turkish border in 2013. The terrorist says his life is hanging in the balance depending on what President Obama does next. Let's bring in our senior international correspondent, Nick Payton-Walsh. He is in Erbil in northern Iraq. Nick?
Brianna, James Foley was kidnapped in November 2012, a comparative long time ago, when the Syrian civil war was underway near a town called Tafanaz, Binish, whilst coming out of an internet cafe. It was unclear at that time who had taken him, and back then, ISIS, as it's now known, didn't really exist. inside Syria and less so in its current form in Iraq. So clearly within the 636, if you count the days in which he was held in captivity, he changed hands within the underground that functions as sort of Syria's kidnap business. There are a lot of Americans, it seems, have been held at some point, or other foreigners, by the various different groups that make up Syria's rebels at times, some of them more criminal, some of them moderate. And as time has gone by, ISIS, it seems, has moved into that particular market and taken some of those individuals to one side. I've spoken to one American who actually escaped kidnapped by Syrian rebels, the more extreme variety, and he described how long periods were spent locked underground. He eventually managed to escape from that, and described also the torture he'd suffered. But in this circumstances, for James Foley's family, a horrific time. He was a veteran correspondent in many conflict areas, was briefly detained in 2011 in Libya by Muammar Gaddafi's forces, and as I say, then detained, and then subsequently it's not clear what exactly his path was, who held him, until we've seen this horrifying video today, the orange jumpsuit, reminding many people of past videos people have seen emerging from Iraq during the times of the insurgency against the American presence there. And of course it would be equally troubling for the other American journalist referenced in that video to see him also in an orange jumpsuit. A deeply troubling moment, I think, for many of the journalists who've been covering this conflict for quite some time, to have known that our friends and colleagues have been held by ISIS and then released, some of them still held now. And many, I think, were worried that if US intervention began against ISIS, who in the eyes of many observers are in the likely long-term a threat to the United States' interests, that if US military campaigns against them began, that those Americans held by ISIS may meet the kind of gruesome fate that it appears we have seen James Foley meet in this.
All right. As family, friends, and colleagues mourn the death of American journalist James Foley, President Obama today had strong words for the Sunni extremists who killed the reporter.
Jim was taken from us in an act of violence that shocks the conscience of the entire world.
The president condemned James Foley's killers in a brief appearance at Martha's Vineyard.
Their victims are overwhelmingly Muslim, and no faith teaches people to massacre innocents. No just God would stand for what they did yesterday and what they do every single day. From governments and peoples across the Middle East, there has to be a common effort to extract this cancer so that it does not spread. There has to be a clear rejection of these kind of nihilistic ideologies.
The National Security Council confirmed it is Foley in the gruesome video posted yesterday by the Islamic State group, titled "A Message to America." The NewsHour has chosen not to show any of the images. Foley was abducted in Syria in November 2012 while reporting for the news site Global Post.
A grim routine has taken hold in the fight for Syria's largest city.
Just a few months earlier, he filed this report on what life looked like in a rebel-controlled neighborhood of Aleppo. His career as a freelance photojournalist spanned a number of countries and conflicts. In 2010, reporting for the NewsHour in Afghanistan, Foley found himself in the line of fire as he shared a first-hand look at a Taliban ambush on an American infantry unit.
It was only after this near catastrophe that we see the convoy's front truck is on fire, and worse, the soldiers have pulled a casualty to the side of the mountain as others frantically begin to work on him.
In 2011, in Libya, Foley was held for 45 days by forces loyal to former dictator Muammar Gaddafi. Following his release, he spoke about that kidnapping on the NewsHour.
I never worried, that I would be in captivity for, let's say, a year. I was concerned. I was really concerned to tell my mom that I was okay. And when we hit that 2-week mark, I knew, okay, this is going to be a long time. They're telling us 2 to 3 days, but they're just playing mind games with us.
It was unclear who initially abducted Foley in Syria or when he fell into the hands of Islamic State forces. But his death marked the first time they've killed an American citizen in the Syrian conflict.
It haunts me how much pain he was in and how cruel this method of execution is.
Still shaken, Foley's parents emerged from their home in Rochester, New Hampshire today to remember their son.
Jim had kind of had 9 lives. I mean, he came out of Libya, and I guess we just never gave up hope either. We just kept thinking that somehow we're getting closer, we know he's alive, we just ran out of time. He ran out of time.
Foley was 40 years old. The same video also showed another American journalist, Stephen Sotloff, who has written for Time magazine. The militants threatened he'll be killed next if U.S. airstrikes in Iraq continue. The Committee to Protect Journalists estimates at least 20 other news professionals are being held in Syria.
It is an act of murder, and murder without any justification.
Meanwhile, British Prime Minister David Cameron announced a manhunt for the hooded militant with a British accent who appeared in the beheading video.
Good evening. Today I authorized 2 operations in Iraq. Targeted airstrikes to protect our American personnel, and a humanitarian effort to help save thousands of Iraqi civilians who are trapped on a mountain without food and water and facing almost certain death. Let me explain the actions we're taking and why. First, I said in June, as the terrorist group ISIL began an advance across Iraq, that the United States would be prepared to take targeted military action in Iraq if and when we determined that the situation required it. In recent days, these terrorists have continued to move across Iraq and have neared the city of Erbil, where American diplomats and civilians serve at our consulate, and American military personnel advise Iraqi forces. To stop the advance on Erbil, I've directed our military to take targeted strikes against ISIL terrorist convoys should they move toward the city. We intend to stay vigilant and take action if these terrorist forces threaten our personnel or facilities anywhere in Iraq, including our consulate in Erbil and our embassy in Baghdad. We're also providing urgent assistance to Iraqi government and Kurdish forces so they can more effectively wage the fight against ISIL.
I call on my friends, family, and loved ones to rise up against my real killers, the U.S. government. For what will happen to me is only a result of their complacency and criminality. My message to my beloved parents: save me some dignity and don't accept any meager compensation for my death from the same people who effectively hit the last nail in my coffin with their recent aerial campaign in Iraq. I call on my brother John, who is a member of the U.S. Air Force. Think about what you are doing. Think about the lives you destroy, including those of your own family. I call on you, John. Think about who made the decision to bomb Iraq recently and kill those people, whoever they may have been. Think, John, who did they really kill? And did they think about me, you, our family when they made that decision? I died that day, John. When your colleagues dropped that bomb on those people, they signed my death certificate. I wish I had more time. I wish I could have the hope of freedom and seeing my family once again. But that ship has sailed. I guess all in all, I wish I was an American.
This is James Wright Foley, an American citizen of your country. As a government, you have been at the forefront of the aggression towards the Islamic State. You have plotted against us and gone far out of your way to find reasons to interfere in our affairs. Today, your military air force is attacking us daily in Iraq. Your strikes have caused casualties amongst Muslims. You are no longer fighting an insurgency. We are an Islamic army and a state that has been accepted by a large number of Muslims worldwide. So effectively, Any aggression towards the Islamic State is an aggression towards Muslims from all walks of life who have accepted the Islamic Caliphate as their leadership. So any attempt by you, Obama, to deny the Muslims their rights of living in safety under the Islamic Caliphate will result in the bloodshed of your people.
Good afternoon, everybody. Today, the entire world is appalled by the brutal murder of Jim Foley by the terrorist group ISIL. A journalist, a son, a brother, and a friend. He reported from difficult and dangerous places, bearing witness to the lives of people a world away. He was taken hostage nearly 2 years ago in Syria, and he was courageously reporting at the time on the conflict there. Jim was taken from us in an act of violence that shocks the conscience of the entire world. He was 40 years old, one of 5 siblings, the son of a mom and dad who worked tirelessly for his release. Earlier today, I spoke to the Foleys and told them that we are all heartbroken at their loss and join them in honoring Jim and all that he did. Now, Jim Foley's life stands in stark contrast to his killers. Let's be clear about ISIL. They have rampaged across cities and villages, killing innocent, unarmed civilians in cowardly acts of violence. They abduct women and children and subject them to torture and rape and slavery. They have murdered Muslims, both Sunni and Shia, by the thousands. They target Christians and religious minorities, driving them from their homes, murdering them when they can, for no other reason than they practice a different religion. They declare their ambition to commit genocide against an ancient people. So ISIL speaks for no religion. Their victims are overwhelmingly Muslim, and no faith teaches people to massacre innocents. No just God would stand for what they did yesterday and what they do every single day. ISIL has no ideology of any value to human beings. Their ideology is bankrupt. They may claim out of expediency that they are at war with the United States or the West, but the fact is they terrorize their neighbors and offer them nothing but an endless slavery to their empty vision and the collapse of any definition of civilized behavior. And people like this ultimately fail. They fail because the future is won by those who build and not destroy, and the world is shaped by people like Jim Foley and the overwhelming majority of humanity who are appalled by those who killed him. The United States of America will continue to do what we must do to protect our people. We will be vigilant and we will be relentless. When people harm Americans anywhere, we do what's necessary to see that justice is done, and we act against ISIL, standing alongside others. The people of Iraq, who with our support are taking the fight to ISIL, must continue coming together to expel these terrorists from their communities. Whose story Jim Foley told do not deserve to live under the shadow of a tyrant or terrorists. They have our support in their pursuit of a future rooted in dignity. From governments and peoples across the Middle East, there has to be a common effort to extract this cancer so that it does not spread. There has to be a clear rejection of these kind of nihilistic ideologies. One thing we can all agree on is that a group like ISIL has no place in the 21st century. Friends and allies around the world, we share a common security and a common set of values that are rooted in the opposite of what we saw yesterday. And we will continue to confront this hateful terrorism and replace it with a sense of hope and civility. That's what Jim Foley stood for. A man who lived his work, who courageously told the stories of his fellow human beings, and who was liked and loved by friends and family. Today, the American people will all say a prayer for those who love Jim. All of us feel the ache of his absence. All of us mourn his loss. We keep in our prayers those other Americans who are separated from their families. We will do everything that we can to protect our people and the timeless values that we stand for. May God bless and keep Jim's memory, and may God bless the United States of America.